welcome. My name is Khalid. Pleasure to meet you all here. I'm going to be presenting a session about Salesforce and MuleSoft, and I'll just give you a little brief background about myself. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a Salesforce technical architect. I have over 12 years of Salesforce experience and over a year of MuleSoft experience. I have 14 Salesforce certifications, and I'm MuleSoft certified as well. Um, I'm a MuleSoft mentor as well. I co-lead a Women in Tech user group, and I blog about Salesforce and MuleSoft, and I'm a very recent Salesforce Golden Hoodie holder. Um, so that's about me. We'll jump into the topic. So high level, the table of contents is we're going to start with an introduction to MuleSoft. We're going to discuss how MuleSoft works, and then we're going to discuss when it makes sense to use MuleSoft, when you should not use MuleSoft. We're going to cover about a new product called MuleSoft Composer. And then we're going to go into the different Salesforce APIs, and we're going to cover the different APIs and how you can interact with them using MuleSoft. And then we're going to look into some useful resources and some Q&A. So without further ado, let's talk about, what is MuleSoft, an introduction to MuleSoft. So basically, MuleSoft started out as an application that was running in a Tomcat server. And then, like Salesforce, MuleSoft was also an early player in the cloud. They introduced Cloud Hub, their cloud-based system, which is a complete managed deployment cloud, starting back in 2006. And then I don't know if a lot of people don't know this fact, but before Salesforce even acquired MuleSoft, Salesforce was an investor for MuleSoft. So they invested in MuleSoft going back in 2013. So MuleSoft basically is a transformational company. They target enterprises with fragmented enterprise systems to build unified IT application networks. MuleSoft helped in major technology and business transformations for hospitality businesses, that were suffering loss of sale during the pandemic. So how does MuleSoft work? So like we discussed, originally it was a servlet app that was running in Tomcat. Then they developed their own app container that was called TCAT. Then they actually developed a cloud deployment, which is on AWS on an EC2 instance. Then they created a Mule server, which is a new app container. Then they worked towards creating Anypoint platform, which is what most of us work with today. And Anypoint platform is a unified development experience. It brings together development, it brings together exchange, management, uh, governance, visualization, and monitoring platform as a service. So recognize containerization in Kubernetes and develop a runtime fabric. So this is something they did recently, I think probably dating 2 years back or a year and a half back, but they have a runtime fabric now, which specialized in Kubernetes clusters running in Mule apps. They have recognized investment in microservices and developed service mesh to include them in the Anypoint platform. So as we can see, they came a long way from starting in a Tomcat servlet app to what they are today, and I'm sure there's a lot more to come. So that's a key question, right? Like a lot of people wonder when it makes sense to use MuleSoft, when it does not make sense to use MuleSoft. A lot of us work with integrations when we're working in Salesforce. So when would it make sense to use MuleSoft? So one thing to know about MuleSoft is that there is a high price factor. So when it makes sense to use MuleSoft is probably when your enterprise is large enough to afford an IT investment in the millions, because that's probably what the cost is going to be. When the other use case would be when legacy systems integration is not solved, or when problems are at a point where you need an enterprise bus like MuleSoft. Or either in a scenario where you have microservices that are developed, but legacy systems are not integrated, or they don't have API capabilities. So when does it not make sense to use MuleSoft? So it's not for small or medium-sized businesses. Like we said, it makes more sense for enterprise companies which have a large budget. Salesforce typically has an adequate solution for integration using callouts or other mechanisms. And then also, from a company perspective, governance and control is not important enough to, secure executive buy-in, because if you really have very strong governance and control in your enterprise, then that could be another push or reason to invest in MuleSoft. So next, we're going to go to MuleSoft Composer for Salesforce. So MuleSoft Composer for Salesforce is a recent offering that was launched. It's actually a mini MuleSoft that's embedded within Salesforce. So all the backend stuff that you typically deal with in MuleSoft is kind of not it's not your headache to set all that up, basically. So you're not going to have to deal with setting up any point platform or doing a lot of the other things you would be doing on the any point platform with MuleSoft. Basically, the composer will be doing all of that on your behalf, but on the back end, it is going to be using the anypoint platform, but it's just something that's hidden from you. So MuleSoft Composer basically is a point and click way of building integrations from within Salesforce. So it's just kind of like you build flows or like process builder. It's literally point and click, but obviously, since it's a new offering, it's in its infancy. It only has certain set of connectors that it supports. So connectors means like which apps you can connect with. This list is growing, obviously. And then I think in the future, they do have plans that you can basically, if your organization is already using MuleSoft, it is in the future roadmap that you can leverage basically any APIs that you have built in any point platform from within Composer. So it's really cool. I mean, it's obviously has a cost factor to it as well, but it's a very easy way for admins to interact and just simply build integrations without writing any code. So next, we're going to go into an overview of Salesforce APIs. So basically, APIs are a way for other applications to programmatically interact with Salesforce. So over the course of years, Salesforce has obviously evolved as a platform, as we've all seen, and they have a lot of different APIs, obviously each for its own specific use case. Some of the common known APIs are like the REST API, the SOAP API, Metadata, Chatter, Bulk, Streaming. There's obviously more. So Salesforce is, as we all know, is a cloud-based multi-tenant environment. And obviously, due to this multi-tenancy and cloud-based environment, there are certain governor limits, uh, imposed on APIs as well. There are very specific limits around APIs as well. We'll share a link of them here in the slide later on. But for detailed information about all these different APIs, Salesforce developer documentation has really good documentation on all of these different APIs and all the different objects and all the different methods that are supported. So we're going to start with the Salesforce REST API. So I'm sure most of us who've dealt with integrations are familiar with what REST APIs are. But REST APIs are nothing but like a convenient, powerful way for us to interact with the Salesforce Lightning platform. They are JSON based, and they are not meant for large data sets. For large data sets, we will talk about the Bulk API. REST API basically uses the same underlying data structure and standard objects as the SOAP API. And then each resource in the REST API is identified by a named uniform resource identifier, which we call the URI, and is accessed using standard HTTP methods. So HTTP methods like head, get, post, patch, delete. We can use the Salesforce developer workbench to interact with the REST API. So for those of you familiar with the Workbench, there's a section for REST APIs. It makes it really easy and convenient if you want to play around with the REST API. Then you can obviously also use Postman if you're interested in exploring these APIs. So I'm gonna stop the presentation here, and I'm just gonna quickly pull up Workbench to show you guys. Give me a second. So this is basically Workbench. For those of you not familiar, it's completely browser-based tool. And then in here, if you go under Utilities, you have a section called REST Explorer. So, basically this is where you will see all these different HTTP methods. And then, by calling the URI that you need to, you can interact with the API. So I think I had an example in here. I can run that. So basically, I'm in this example, I'm just retrieving information about a specific account. I'm passing the ID here, and this is basically the same account. So all it's doing is, it's returning all the details. So if it was another system that wanted to interact with Salesforce and they would use the REST API, they would just simply call an endpoint like this to get information about that particular account. So next, we're gonna go into the SOAP API. So we use a SOAP API pretty much in similar function to the REST API. It's used to create, retrieve, update, delete records, like accounts, leads, other custom objects, standard objects. SOAP API supports more than 20 different calls. The main difference between REST and SOAP is that, REST is JSON based, but SOAP is XML based. And then underneath the hood in the MuleSoft Salesforce connectors, in Anypoint Studio, they are using the SOAP API behind the scenes. So next, we're just gonna go, actually, I'm gonna be jumping into Anypoint Studio just to show you guys what that looks like. And then we will run a project in there, a very simple project, and then we should see how it works. So give me a second. So this is basically our Anypoint Studio. And then I'm gonna run this project. So all we're doing in this project, this is the Salesforce connectors, MuleSoft connectors. These are all pre-built connectors. And then they're just basically drag and drop and just configuring. So basically, you don't have to directly call the endpoint. It's just doing all that for you. You basically, if you want to query, in this example, we're just querying data from one org, and then we're actually creating data in another org from what we're getting in that org. So gonna go to Workbench, Postman, sorry. So I've gone into Postman. So basically, Postman is used for interacting with APIs. It's a commonly used tool when you're interacting with APIs. So in this case, I'm running this API, this particular project. This listener is listening on this path for SF SOAP. So that's why I'm calling it. It's on my local host. The default port is 8081. So when I run this, it's returning me the items that were inserted. It's showing me there are no exceptions. It's returning me a payload, which showing that it was successful. It's returning me the IDs. In this case, I was querying accounts and then inserting an account. and there's multiples here. So it's returning all those records that were inserted into that org. So as you can see, it's super simple to interact with. If we go here, I'm basically just querying, I'm writing a query, a SOQL query where I'm getting the name and phone from accounts. And I've just put a limit of 5 and then inserting that into another org and just transforming that output in JSON, because by default, all these are taking in Java. So just to show you guys the response, I'm outputting it into a JSON structure and showing it here. So I'm gonna go back to our presentation. Just a second. I'm just gonna looking for one more thing in Salesforce. I'm just gonna look for one of these records. Okay. So that was, a very high level example of the SOAP API and how we interact with the SOAP API in Anypoint Studio. So next, we're gonna go into the Salesforce Bulk API. So Bulk API again is based on REST principles, so it's REST based, and it's optimized for loading, updating, or deleting large sets of data. So you can use it to query all, insert, update, upsert, or delete many records. One thing to keep in mind about the Bulk API is that it is asynchronous. So on the back end, it is asynchronous and it processes the records in batches. So basically, when you send a request, Salesforce processes those batches in the background. There are certain limits, obviously, with the Bulk API as well, but they're pretty high. As you can see, the maximum number of records allowed in 24 hours is 150 million. Um, Maximum number of records you can submit in a single batch is 10,000. So how it works on the back end is that you process a set of records by creating a job that contains one or more batches. So when we actually send a request to the Bulk API, it will create a job and it will give us a job ID. And then that job is what will be processing the batching and taking care of that all internally. So you can have the batches be processed in serial, or you can have them processed in parallel. Obviously, processing them in parallel will increase your speed for processing the records, but it really depends on your use case. It might make sense to do it in parallel if you're say inserting the same object, but if you're inserting dependent objects, so suppose you need to insert or update accounts and then related contacts, if you're inserting that, you would not want to go for parallel, because you would not want like your contacts to process at the same time as your accounts, because you have a dependency. You would need your accounts created before you can create the dependent contacts. So in that use case, it wouldn't make sense for you to use parallel processing. So it really depends on your use case to decide how you want to do the processing. So we're going to do another very simple example about the Salesforce Bulk API. So in this example, I'm just going to I'm going to read a CSV file on my machine, and then we're going to use this pre-built connector, the create job bulk API version 2, to take the input of those files, those CSV files, and then insert that data into Salesforce. Okay, I'm gonna run this. It's gonna take a little bit, but this is just reading a file that's on my machine, and then this is the processor. So basically, all you need to do is you need to specify the object that you're going to be inserting in. And in this case, we're just taking the data that we're getting from the file and we're passing the payload. And the operation I've chosen is that I'm inserting the records, and it's just taking some other factors in, like what my line ending is. So this is a carriage return line feed. The delimiter is comma. Um, so we'll give it a little bit to run. So it's showing that it's deployed. So now I'm gonna go back to my Postman. So here in Postman, I just invoked it by calling the listener that I have here, which is listening at sfbug. So as you can see, it's saying there's no error messages. It's returning a job ID that we can see here. And then it's saying that the state of this particular job is that it's in progress. Operation is insert. The content type that we're inserting is a CSV, and then it's showing the object that we're inserting into is an account. So yeah, so in Sales, I've logged into my Salesforce, the one that I was inserting this data in, and basically you can see this is the job ID that we're seeing here. It's showing that it was submitted by my user. It's showing that it started at this time. It ended, and now the status has gone to job complete. It's using the Bulk API version 2 at the back. We're doing an insert, and we're inserting into accounts, and we have 7 records. Nothing failed. And if you click into the particular job ID, it's gonna show you the details. So it shows you it split it into 2 batches by default, how much processing time it took on each particular batch. Since my records were very small, it basically did all the processing in this particular batch, even though it automatically splits into 2 batches, but everything got done in this one. Progress is my 100%, and then it was completed successfully. There's no errors. So that was the Bulk API. So let me stop this project, and we're going to go back to our presentation. So next, we're going to be diving into the Salesforce Metadata API. So what the Metadata API is basically used to, retrieve, deploy, create, update, or delete customization information, like custom objects, page layout definitions in the org. So this API is intended, for when you want to manage customizations, and you want to interact with the metadata, not the data in the org itself. So you can use the metadata API to manage setup and customization information. Some examples could be if you want to export the customizations in your org as an XML metadata file, if you want to migrate configuration changes between orgs. So basically, even like when you're doing deployments, you're, basically change sets and things, you're interacting with the metadata API. If you want to modify existing customizations in your org, if you want to manage customizations in your org programmatically, you'll all be making use of the metadata API on the back end. For metadata API, you can deploy or retrieve up to 10,000 files at one time. So now we're gonna be going into a quick example for the metadata API. So it's a very simple example. We're using another built-in processor here called describe metadata. And that's just going to retrieve all the different types of metadata that are available in your Salesforce org. So I'm gonna switch to Anypoint Studio. So as you can see again, this is all built-in processors. It is a describe metadata processor we're using in here. And then we're just basically transforming the output that we're getting to JSON and outputting that. So very simple. So we'll give that a little bit to run. So now that the project is deployed, I'm going to go back to Postman, and in this case, I'm going to call this endpoint SF metadata. So you can see it's basically returning all the different metadata that I have available in my org. It's a lot of metadata objects, but you can get the gist. You have installed packages, custom labels, static resources, S controls, certificates, and it's going to go on and on because this is a very long list. But it's basically just showing you all the different metadata types that are available in this particular org. So I'm gonna stop this project. We're gonna go back to our presentation. So that was the metadata API, very simple example. Next, we're gonna go into the Salesforce Streaming API. So basically, the Salesforce Streaming API enables the streaming of events using push technology, and it provides a subscription mechanism for receiving events in near real time. So the Streaming API subscription mechanism supports multiple types of events, including push topics, generic events, platform events, and change data capture. So you typically use Streaming API in MuleSoft when you want MuleSoft to consume an event that has been published from Salesforce, or when you want to publish events to Salesforce from MuleSoft. And more details are available here in the link here. So in this case, we'll be using the change data capture just to show you how MuleSoft will listen for a change. So we're going to be triggering an event from Salesforce in this case. We're going to be listening to that change in MuleSoft, and we'll show you what that looks like. So in this particular mechanism, like I said, I'm going to be using change data capture. So I'm going to pull up my Salesforce org. So this is my Salesforce org, and basically you can see, I have changed data capture enabled on accounts and cases in this particular example. So basically that means that Salesforce will automatically be generating event notifications for these particular objects, and it will automatically be sending notifications when you create, update, delete, or undelete these records. Change data capture would also be supporting, it supports all custom objects as well, and then some of the standard objects. So you can see the list here. But in this example, we're just going to be showing you with accounts. So for that, I will go into my AnyPoint, and I'm going to close that project. And then I'm going to open the Streaming API. I'm going to run that project. So basically, in this case, I don't have a regular listener. I have a specific listener, which is the replay channel listener. This is a built-in processor in the Salesforce connector. And basically, it is, again, pretty simple. You configure your credentials here, and then it automatically picks up the different streaming channels that are available in my org. So in the example I was showing in my org, I had change data capture enabled on accounts and cases. So it's automatically pulling down these streaming channels that are available in this org. We have account change event, we have a case change event. Let's go back into our org here and say, if I take this account, let's just modify something on this account. So let's say I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna change my phone number. Make sure The project is running. Okay. So I'm gonna save this. So saving this should trigger the notification, which we can see is here. So I'm gonna copy this out so you guys can look at it. See. Let me paste it. Actually, let me put that into the chat so you can all see it. Oh, there's a character limit on the chat. Okay, hang on. Okay, I'm putting it in here in my OneNote. Basically, you can see it's showing the payload here. So payload is basically showing me what everything that's coming in for this particular record when it was last modified, and then it's showing me the field that I changed. In this case, it was the phone number. It's showing me, the commit number, which is a unique identifier for each change, showing me which user committed that change. It's showing me the entity that we made the change on was an account. The change type was an update. We didn't do an insert, we updated that account. And it's showing me the change field. So basically, I changed the phone, which obviously automatically modified the last modified date. So my change fields are my phone and last modified date. It's showing me the change origin, which is from Salesforce, transaction ID, and then it's showing me the record ID as well. So basically, it's very cool. If you have interactions, integrations with multiple systems, and if suppose you want to capture a change in near real time that happens in Salesforce, and you need to propagate that down to downstream systems, it's really great for doing that. It will listen to the changes and it will tell you what got changed. And in MuleSoft, you can easily set up connectors to those other integrations and update the data there as well. So that was the streaming API. Let's go back to a presentation. So I think this was the last one, but I will just show you another example of another one. It's not documented here, but basically it's the composite REST API. So composite REST API, for those of you that are not familiar with it, is basically when it's a really cool way if you want to do interact with objects that are in a sequence. So suppose if you want to insert, update something that is for one object, but it has another dependent object. So basically, if I want to, create accounts and contacts programmatically, typically, in the before you would use the REST API, say you would first insert your accounts, you would get back your account IDs, and then you would use those account IDs in the contacts, and then you would do another call to insert the contacts. So the composite resources, basically the composite REST API really simplifies that. It basically lets you insert multiple related objects in a single call, which is really, really cool. So you can insert accounts and all the related contacts in a single API call. So this particular example, I'm just, getting some accounts and contacts from a local database. And then I'm transforming it to a tree structure. So basically, there's a very specific structure that is expected in Salesforce. And in this case, you can see like here, there's a different connector. It's not the standard Salesforce connectors. There's another a connector available in Exchange specifically for the REST Composite API. So this is called the Salesforce Composite, and then you can see it has all these different processors here available under it. So in this case, we're doing the create S object tree. Basically, you need to convert everything into a tree-like structure that Salesforce expects for the Composite REST API. And that's how we're doing these two different transforms to kind of convert that data that we're getting from the database into that tree structure so that we can pass it to this as object tree over here. So I'm gonna try that in Postman. So, in this case, for sake of simplicity, I just had a limit of one. So basically, I was just selecting one account and one related contact. So if I move over to Postman, I ran the call. It's showing me it had no errors. And in my results, I'm getting back two identifiers. So you can see I have an account ID and I have a contact ID. So all in one go. So if I go back to Salesforce, you can pull up those records. So this is the account that just created, and then I was able to create the related contact all in one single call in one go. So this is really, really cool. It's really powerful. If you're doing data migration, you have like a lot of records, related records. It's a really good way to move those related records in a single API call. So let's go back to our presentation. I think I am towards the end. So next, we're just going to go to some useful resources. The first one I've shared is the Salesforce APIs for Postman. So basically, on GitHub, there's already available. You can just grab that, and then in Postman, you will be able to see all the different APIs within Postman. So it makes it really easy. You'll have a structure for all the calls. The Salesforce developer documentation for the APIs, sharing a link for that as well. Then for Workbench, next I'm sharing my blog. My blog is specifically focused just on Salesforce and MuleSoft integrations. So it has a lot of use cases just talking about these integrations. Then for those of you who are not familiar with MuleSoft but want to learn about MuleSoft, MuleSoft also has their own training platform at training.mulesoft.com, and there is a free training available as well. They have both instructor-led and then they have self-paced training, which is available for free. And then if you are, ready, if you want to take a MuleSoft certification, the developer certification, there is really great exam readiness kit available. The link for which is shared here. And then we have the MuleSoft Composer, a link for that, showing you details about the MuleSoft Composer. So that was my presentation. We can go to any questions if anyone has anything.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was wonderful, and I hope it was an informative session for everyone. So let's see if we have any questions. So Anish has a question. So when we use Composite API, if child record gives error or not inserted, how it works in MuleSoft? Is there any exception error?
Yeah, it will. The default is that if one record fails, it will the whole transaction will fail. That's the default behavior. So it will return you the error, but the default is that it will fail the entire transaction if one record fails.
Okay, I hope Anish, you have got the answer. Any other question, guys?